I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate. Before I was re-elected to this chamber in February 2011, I was a Dublin City Councillor for more than 30 years. A lot of what went on in the Dublin councils in the 1980s and 90s, which was later reported on by the Mahon Tribunal, was caused by greed, corruption and unregulated lobbying, which led to unsafe planning decisions. I spoke in the first Dáil debate on the Mahon Report when it was published. It was of special interest to me as the Baldoyle, the Clochran and Drumnai Mahon Report modules referred to the 1993 rezonings which took place in Dublin North East constituency, where Judge Mahon found that corrupt payments were made to some councillors. In March of 2012, I called on the Director of Public Prosecution to consider these findings of the Mahon Tribunal. In Chapter 9, the Tribunal found that Mr Frank Dunlop paid 6 councillors named in the Mahon Report sums of €1,000 equivalent to £1,000 each for their support for the 1993 Baldoyle lands rezoning motions. Another councillor received a payment of £1,000 from Mr Dunlop at that time, which the councillor told the Mahon Tribunal was a donation to his January 1993 Senate election campaign after he lost his Dáil seat. This was the period when the dual mandate was allowed for Dáil deputies. All of this corruption and unregulated lobbying led to, as I have just said, unsafe planning decisions that triggered the property bubble a decade later. In my Dublin North East constituency, the estates built on the rezoned Baldoyle racecourse lands were left unfinished and are only now being completed, thanks to government initiatives and initiatives taken by Fingal County Council. In nearby Donamead, the death trap apartment complex of Parry Hall, built by cowboy builder Tom McFeely, was the worst planning disaster of the Celtic Tiber property boom. The property boom, unfortunately, attracted cowboys like McFeely. I don't think any of the Sinn Féin speakers in this debate have referred to the Tom McFeely Priory Hall saga so far, and I stand to be corrected on that. I always held the view that Priory Hall should be demolished, and I welcome the fact that Dublin City Council have now commenced rebuilding Priory Hall with government funding provided to Dublin City Council. I thought of the comparison with Priory Hall when it was reported recently that 6 houses in the Millfield Manor estate in Newbridge, County Kildare, were completely gutted by a fire. Many new homes built in North Dublin during the Celtic Tiger period were infected with pyrite. Homeowners struggling with mortgage payments and negative equity did not need the pyrite problem on top of that. This government, through the setting up of the Pyrite Resolution Board, put a mechanism in place to deal with this planning failure, and I'm glad that homes in Clongriffin and Donamead and the coast and Baldoyle have had their pyrite issues dealt with to their satisfaction. There are still some homes in Belmain and Balgriffin where a solution to the pyrite problem is still unresolved. The difficulty in Belmain arises because of a decision by the insurance company involved not to cover the costs incurred by the homeowner, who has to engage qualified professionals to prove the presence of pyrite in their homes in the first place. The cost of this can mount up to €3,000, and as I said already, the insurance companies, very unfairly in my view, will not reimburse the homeowner for this additional cost for which they are painfully out of pocket. Many of these planning, building control and compliance failures happened because of the laissez-faire, light-touch regulation regimes that were then in place. These have now been reformed and strengthened by this government, and I am glad to be part of that reform. In June of 2012, I welcomed the legislation on lobbying that was introduced at that time, and I say then that this government was keen to create more transparency over government decision-making, and to that effect was enacting legislation dealing with the issue. For the first time, the public will now be able to view information on the contacts that are made between the lobbyists and government. And this is critically important, as it needs to be highlighted that these are moves to legislate on the basis of the recommendations of the Mahon Report for far greater transparency over the role of lobbyists. In the Planning No. 2 bill, which is currently being developed to go before this House, the core function of the new regulator will relate to the evaluation and assessment of local plans and regional strategies, including land rezonings, and will make recommendations to the Minister on these matters. Where the Minister agrees with the recommendations of the regulator, the Minister will issue appropriate directions and instructions to the relevant local authority on the steps that should be taken in relation to the revision of the relevant plan or strategy. As I said, the Mahon Report focused on events in Dublin, but we must not forget that there are concerns regarding planning decisions in the rest of the country. This is why independent consultants McCabe, Downey, Barnes have been appointed on a statutory basis to conduct a review of the planning applications on the application of planning practices and procedures in 6 of the 7 local authorities: Carlow, Cork, Galway, Meath and Cork, as well as Dublin councils. I know I'm coming out running short of time. Can't call it. The Minister intends that the review undertaken by McCabe, Downey, Barnes will take precedence over his department's own review, and he will carefully consider and implement any further recommendations that emerge from this independent review. In conclusion, I regard the Mahon Report as a fundamental point of departure from the inadequate standards of the past and a beginning of a new approach to planning in this country, and I know that the Government is determined to continue to act on the findings and recommendations of the Mahon Tribunal and to ensure that our planning system is never again allowed to be exploited as it was in the past. Instead, our planning system will be redesigned and operated properly to ensure that it is a properly functioning, effective and responsive and transparent, publicly accountable planning system.
Thank you.
Thank you.